persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Hello, welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ, and please forgive the technical problems we've had.
Better late than never.
Yeah.
Then again, some people might say better never than late.
Exactly. This show will broadcast in its entirety at 5 p.m. this afternoon. Please be sure to watch. We've only missed about 6 minutes of this show, but you won't get the ending during this broadcast. But the entirety will be broadcast at 5 o'clock. We had some real serious system failures, and of course our tech people and myself were able to pull it out of the fire. So let's get right to the story. Well, ISIS suffered a loss again yesterday. Key ISIS leader killed in Syria, Shahadi group says, and ISIS number 2 leader Abu Muhammad al-Adnani dies of wounds in Syria. So I guess somebody's doing something right, and I think it was the Turkish that were doing it. They were having drills or maneuvers and took this guy out. He's supposedly about 40 years old, and this is a particularly significant loss to ISIS, according to news reports and according to members of the military officials in our government. This is the same gentleman who took out a bounty on all Westerners a few years ago, and I just think it's very interesting that this didn't make a lot of news yesterday when it happened, and it only started making the news this morning. So this guy here believes in a cult of martyrdom, and it's likely to be built around this, and they're calling him a sheik. And they say it's because his body was untouched by the blast of bullets that killed him. Doesn't that make perfect sense? The bullets killed him, but they never touched him.
Well, look, the reality is, again, he was obviously extremely high in the chain of command
Right.
of ISIS, but this again, these are the things that sometimes you've got to look beyond the headlines. Look, the reality of these groups is that they don't go away. His death, they'll make him a martyr, and he'll actually probably do as much damage dead as he did alive. He'll be replaced, as they always are. All we have to do is look at Afghanistan. The Russians were there for 10 years, killing Afghanis, but it didn't stop them. They're still there, and we've been there for 15 years, and they're still killing Americans. Right. So, the reality is, it's the radicalization of Muslims create this mindset that they're going to kill, all the infidels, and it's a reality that we continue, in my opinion, not to face directly and understand. And because they continue to think that if we cut the head off, we kill the snake. Well, this snake does not die if you cut the head off. No. The fact is, it's the fact of radicalization, their beliefs, and the fact is that they'll be there as long as they exist. So, my philosophy on ISIS is kill them all and let God sort them out. So they like to go up there so quickly. Let's send them all there. And but it's we have to look at this in a long term. This is going to be a problem forever, because obviously there are people who can be, look, we had the Crusades, so we did the same thing to them. We had radicalized Christians who went over there and tried to take the Holy Land over, which is probably the seeds of all this stuff. But the reality is, it's something that we have to look at forever. And until we realize that fact, we can eliminate them now, but they always have to be looked upon. And as a lot of people from that region say, you really need a dictator to control these people, because they are prone not only to killing us, but to killing each other. Because if we're not there, the Shiites and the Sunnis will kill each other, because they're still trying to decide who the first imam after Muhammad died is. And they're still fighting over something that happened at the beginning of their religion. So obviously they're prone to being crazy, you know, for the sake of a better word, or radical, or whatever, you know, euphemistic terminology you want to use. But the fact is that that area of the world has a propensity to be killing each other a lot. And if we're there, we can polarize them and have them have a common enemy, and they'll get along for a while. But if we leave, they'll kill each other. So anybody who thinks that this is ever going to go away, in my opinion, is deluding themselves, including our government that keeps, you know, putting forward this myth that somehow we are going to eliminate this threat. We can control this threat. We can make it not a imminent threat, but we're going to have to be observant for the rest of as long as this world exists. It's always going to be an issue with people.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you know, we move on now to state officials say there are fewer homeless families in South Coast motels. I think you said it best earlier. If they're in a motel, right? They're not homeless.
That's right. That's one of the best headlines I've ever seen.
Yep.
You know, they're not going to, there are fewer homeless people in motels. Well, where are they? Are they actually homeless again? Did you throw them out and send them under a bridge? Because, I mean, that headline's kind of like...
Well, you know, and Carol Fiola brought that up, because I guess they've gone from 63 families in one hotel to 8, and they're focusing on the Swansea Motor Inn, the Motel 8 in Somerset, and the Dartmouth Inn in Dartmouth. And at one of those, they went from 63 to 8 families. And Carol Fiola said, but where are they going? Where are they going?
It's a very good question.
Right, because if they're not going to these motels, where are they going? Because there are no other state beds or state facilities available for this. And Pravda said it, you know, that they're getting housing vouchers and whatnot, but I want to know where they're going as well, because this creates a very serious issue. Number one, for those of you who are very tax conscious, your tax dollars were paying hundreds of dollars a week for a hotel room or a motel room for these families to be in.
Thousands.
Okay? And meanwhile, we have the Fall River Housing Authority, the New Bedford Housing Authority, the Brockton Housing Authority, the Worcester Housing Authority, and the towns like Somerset, Dartmouth, Westport, which have very few housing units, which they're required to have more, who are all saying, oh, we have huge vacancies. Well, fill them with these homeless people. Not that I want to see them come, you know, necessarily come to Fall River, but you know, they're coming to Fall River because it's the only place they can get a motel room for them, but they're from Brockton or Bridgewater or elsewhere. Well, find housing for them in those areas. If these housing projects have all of these vacancies, you know, it nauseates me, because I look at the Fall River Housing Authority, run by Dave Sullivan, and there's waiting lists with vacancies all over the place. They're taking 6 months to run a criminal background check, which I appreciate the criminal background checks, don't get me wrong, but I can get a 5-minute national criminal background check on myself. 5 minutes. Go in, they scan my fingerprints, they run my information through, boom, 5 minutes later, I get the report. No record, no record, no record, no record. Okay? But it takes the housing authority weeks and months, because they're contracting it out to some political hack.
Yeah, it's a government entity. You know that one day in private industry equals 6 months in the government.
I thought it was 1 day equals 1 year.
Yeah, well, it's federal, so it's expedited a little bit. So, but you know, like I said, look, at least these are homegrown homeless. So why don't we stick them in there rather than try to import them from Brockton and Connecticut and Pennsylvania? You know, the reality is, what this proves again is the whole system's broken. Right. The only way they know how to fix anything is to spend more money on it. Not to do it right, but to spend more money. So they had these people, and rather than say, well, why don't we try to get them in housing units that are available in the areas that they're homeless? And then maybe we can work on then getting them a job and doing things. No, they said, let's stick them in a motel and pay people who own the motels thousands and thousands of dollars. Because that's what our politicians, that's what our government does best. When in doubt, spend more money.
That's it. Well, you know, we've seen a mass exodus, and I should say mass exodus, but we're seeing an exodus over at Pravda, at the Herald News, which is a Gatehouse Media outlet. And on Monday after our show, I received the information from Gatehouse that they're getting rid of reporters. They're getting rid of photographers. And about a month ago, they offered them a buyout. And their laborers, they offered a buyout too, in a severance package. Gatehouse owns 620 community and business publications, including 125 daily newspapers across the country. And they offered their non-union, I'm going to say this clearly, non-union employees in New England a week of severance pay for every year of employment at the company, which is owned by the New Media Investment Group, which is now the owner of Gatehouse Media. They had until August 12th to accept these buyouts. Now, 2 weeks after that deadline, several employees who didn't take the buyouts were laid off. And employees who declined to identify were informed that there were around 40 people total cut in the New England group, both through voluntary buyouts and subsequent layoffs. How many more layoffs are coming? This is why Gatehouse and the Herald News are charging you online for media, because the printed newspaper is going by the wayside. And I think you need to make it very clear to people who advertise in any newspaper, including Gatehouse or Herald News, Pravda, whatever I may want to call them today, that guess what? I don't get your flyers. I don't get your sales ads. I don't get your coupons because I don't subscribe to the newspaper. It's not like they don't know this already. They're even cutting down their advertising dollars. And, you know, right now, state law mandates that they publish in the local newspaper. But with the dwindling, and I'm saying this very clearly, dwindling subscriber base that these newspapers are having, it's time for our state delegation and our state legislature to change the law. To change it so that there are other outlets utilized to announce the required announcements. The legal announcements. Because I don't get the Herald News. I don't get the Providence Journal. I don't want them because they're useless to me as an individual. So where would I get the notice from? And if I'm getting it online, they don't publish those notices online. So the Herald News, taking the money from the taxpayer, remember this, taking the money from the taxpayer is not providing the service required under the law. Maybe the letter of the law, but not the spirit. Just because it's printed in the newspaper doesn't mean that the majority of people are going to see it. And I firmly believe that that is denying the public the right to know.
Yeah, the print media has gone, the way of the horse and carriage, unfortunately. Right. Not that I think it's a good thing. I think reading is actually a good exercise for your brain. Just like with books, you don't see very many books being, if they do, it's on a Kindle or something like that. But they don't. People do not read print media. They get it instantaneous news on, online and through television and so they've abandoned reading the newspaper. So, it's sad. But then again, newspapers have not helped. Newspapers should, even with today's instantaneous news, a lot of the instantaneous news is incorrect, inaccurate, because they report it so quickly. Sometimes they depend on sources that they have to vet later, and they find out that, oh, wait a minute, it wasn't this, it was that. There weren't 2 casualties, there were none. Or there weren't 2 casualties, there were 25. And print media should be a more in-depth look at the major news issues of the day and of the week. And that's, you should, it should be, but it's just a fact. The fact is that these people, they're not making money because people just don't read it. But I find that article kind of contradictory. Kirk Davis, which I think is an awesome name for a CEO, that sounds like a, screen name, and he said, he said very clearly that the cuts are not part of a nationwide reorganization. And then he said it again, we aren't reorganizing nationally. So obviously, it's to specific areas, and this is one of the specific areas, which I find really crazy, because if you told me to guess who was doing more reading, I would say the Northeast, with the amount of colleges and students that we have here. I would say that probably print media would be doing better here than, let's say, in other areas of the country. But obviously, this is one of the prime areas they're making cuts in. But hey, another thing down the drain.
Well, this story really bothered me. For those of you who have gone to the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, you'll always notice a little black cat walking around. How appropriate. And he's wearing a hatchet and whatnot around his neck. And that's Max. Max is kind of the mascot of the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. He was abandoned there at one point, and they took him in, and they've cared for him and took care of him. And again, another Fall Riverite who doesn't care about anything hit this cat with his car and took off. And Max looks like he might be okay. It's going to be about $3,000 in medical bills for this poor cat. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. I feel bad for him. I wanted to call up the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast and ask him if I can contribute to a relief fund or something. But they believe that he's going to be fine, and they'll spend $3,000 on him because it's their, it's their thing. But the interesting part is, he suffered shock, brain swelling, bruised lungs, and a leg injury that required surgery. He spent the weekend in an oxygen chamber. I mean, are you serious? I mean, what kind of scumbag are you to hit a defenseless animal with your car and not even stop? I mean,
well, it said it didn't even slow down.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you what, I would gladly contribute to the medical bills, and I also will volunteer to impose Hammurabi's code on that driver. If they find him, I will volunteer to drive the car that hits him, because that's what Hammurabi's code was. It was, you got done to you what you did to somebody else. That's and right. I think that was one of the best forms of law we ever had. So the fact is, if you strangled somebody, they strangled you.
That's it.
And I will volunteer to drive the car that hits him.
Can you drive like really fast and then slow down?
I will drive really fast, and I will not hit the brakes.
And you got to back up, right?
Because I am an animal lover. So.
Oh God. Again, union unrest. 2 nursing homes in the area. One's in Swansea, Country Gardens, which, in full disclosure, I was once the director of nursing at that facility when it was under Kindred. And Crawford House on Oak Grove Avenue had an employee standouts in front of them. Because, believe it or not, there's no staff. They're being forced to mandate people. And I don't agree with the mandating portion at all. That used to happen to me a lot when I worked for the state. They didn't have somebody come in and you had to stay. And 24 hours was not unheard of. Although it's supposed to be illegal, it used to happen regularly. But they're demanding more pay because some of them are only making $10.10 an hour. This is your healthcare system at its best. And the new owner now of this company,
who makes a lot more than $10.10 an hour, by the way.
They're Northern Hills Senior Living. They're a limited liability nursing home chain based in New York. And they say they have contract negotiations going on with a union I'm very familiar with, of the 1199 of the New England Healthcare Employees Union, and they're underway. So they stood out there and they're asking for more money. They'd like to go up to $15 an hour, which, guess what? That's what the minimum wage is going up to in a lot of places. In Massachusetts, we're going up to $11 an hour on January 1st. And I can understand their position, because if you were hired today at $10.10 an hour, and on January 1st, you got bumped up to 11, that's all well and good for you. You like that. But what about the person that's already at 11? They're not going to get a 90 cent an hour pay raise. So these are the areas that we have some serious, issues that we have to look at. But this is healthcare. This is where mom and dad may be. They have no nurses, one registered nurse or one LPN for 41 patients. And believe me, that is not abnormal. I've been a director of nurses for these companies, and let me tell you something. They do it all the time. They do it all the time.
Yeah, they'll clean out your bank account
That's
pretty
right.
quickly, but they pay their employees nothing. And again, here's another case of the people who do the work get the least, get crapped on all the time, while the CEOs, like our big pharma and everybody else, gets $16 million pay raises and make big money. I know the CEO of this company is making a lot more than $10.10 an hour. And I'll tell you what, if you look at the proportions, our money isn't being spent in the right places. There are certain areas like healthcare, as I said, should never be for profit. There should be extreme government regulations about profit margins, and about staffing and things. And that's the way it is. People don't like regulations, but there are certain things that necessitate regulations, like pharmaceutical drugs, which is our next topic.
Yeah, well, and I can tell you real quickly before we move on to pharmaceutical drugs, that high turnover rates in the health industry, whether it be in the hospital, the nursing home, rehab facilities, even in your doctor's office, make for poor health outcomes. Very poor outcomes. You get increases of what we call nosocomial infections, or infections that are found inside the facility. Things like MRSA and VRE. And you know what? Those can be deadly. Those can result in the loss of a limb. And it happens because people are short-staffed. And Massachusetts, your state delegations, not only here in Fall River, but across the state, have refused to implement staffing standards, where it's 1 RN to 6 patients, or 1 RN to 10 patients, or 1 RN to 12 patients in the acute care facilities. And the lack of these staffing standards is resulting in poorer health care. Just look at what they've done at all our local hospitals. You can't see your own doctor anymore. You've got to see their hospitalist, who then refers you to their group. So if you go to Charlton, otherwise known as South Coast Hospitals or South Coast Healthcare System, and your doctor is, from Primacare, you get to see a Primacare hospitalist, but all the doctors you see in that hospital are all South Coast physicians. And therefore, they're the ones that are going to see you, even though you may not be able to, because they're not going to send you back to Primacare or to Hawthorne or to Stewart Medical Group. And this is because our healthcare system has become a crapshoot. And that's a crapshoot that is not in any way, shape, or form acceptable.
Not a crapshoot, it's crap.
It's
because
crap,
when
yeah.
when you look at pharmaceutical drugs, you look at the cost of healthcare, you look at the cost of everything, it's disproportionate to
Right.
the standard of care you're getting.
Right.
And it's just inexcusable, and the blame rests squarely on our legislators on a state and federal level for not closing loopholes and making these people accountable.
Right now it's impossible because our governor used to run the healthcare systems.
Well, all his friends are making a lot of money.
Exactly.
So nobody's going to do it.
Especially the narcotic fiends.
That's right.
So, we've been talking a lot about the EpiPen thing, and now Mylan, which is the company which manufactures the EpiPen, is coming out with a new EpiPen type device. It's the generic version, and they're going to sell it to you for $300 instead of $600.
And it's a generic.
And it's a generic.
They should be selling it to you for $50.
Well, the funny part about it is epinephrine in and of itself is a generic. So
yeah, well, epinephrine, it's the delivery system, but the fact is, that stuff you can buy a vial for pennies.
Yeah, it's like $3 for a vial, which has like 10 shots in it.
Yeah,
so.
it's like it's the whole
like
thing
30
is
cents a dose.
the whole thing's ludicrous, as all these drugs are. Anything you need, they will gouge you on.
Right. Well, and let's look at insulin. Okay, and I can attest to this. I am a diabetic. I am on insulin. And I pay $300 a vial. One vial of insulin for me is good for 10 days. So I got to go through 3 vials, sometimes 4 in a month. At $300 is $1,200 a month. Now, here's where the kicker is. The patent for insulin was sold or given to the drug company for $1 by the gentleman who developed this. And the reason he did it was in the hopes that the drug companies would make this available at low cost across the world to save lives. Well, guess what? The drug company said, "Bull! We're not going to do that." And the funny part about it is, initially, insulin used to be derived from the pancreases of pigs and cows. They would actually get the insulin right out of there. And then some genius said, "Hey, wait a minute. We might be able to do this cheaper." So, and I'm going to ask our viewers to please excuse the way I put this. So what they did was they genetically modified shit.
You could have said feces,
No, I had to say it that way because it has a better kick.
Okay.
Okay, but the bacterium that's found in fecal matter is used to create insulin. They changed one carbon or one chain on it, and all of a sudden now it's making its own insulin. And they're doing that cheap. And because you have to laugh, you really do. But now because they're doing that, they're charging you $300 a vial. When I was a kid and I was on insulin, on the stuff that came from pigs and cows, it was the best insulin in the world because, number one, I think it cost $10 a vial. And a vial of that stuff lasted me a month and a half. Now I'm 3 vials in 1 month. And again, that's because of the increase in healthcare and whatnot's happened.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. Now, the funny part about it is the patents held on all of this insulin is preventing the creation of generic insulin, which would be cheaper. And when you look at companies like Sanofi's, Lilly, Squib Novo, they're all the ones that hold the patents. They're the ones that make the insulin. Okay? And the first, the interesting part is the first generic competitor usually would set a price that is only slightly below the branded insulin. Research shows that once there are 2 manufacturers of a generic drug, the price typically drops about 1/2. With 8, it drops to about 1/5. But because insulin is a biosimilar, doesn't mean it is insulin, it's biosimilar, the decline may be more modest, and this will take time. But we have no generic manufacturers. We're not even taking real insulin. It's biosimilar. Give me back the pigs.
Yeah, well, you got a bunch of greedy pigs running these companies.
And we only got no more time, so. But just so you know, Dunkin' Donuts is giving it to you good. No more free coffees when the Patriots win. Now you get 87-cent coffee.
Stay angry and remember, the drug companies are giving you the shaft.
Yeah, and also remember tonight, 5:30, City Hall, the Ordinance Committee meeting to take away your rights of recall. Have a great one.